At my baby's ultrasound, he said, "I want a paternity test." We were supposed to be finding out the gender. That's all I had in my head. I kept imagining him smiling, maybe even crying, holding my hand tighter when we saw her little heartbeat. I had hope in that moment, and then I heard the words, "I want a paternity test." It didn't register right away. My ears heard it, but my heart refused to. I looked at him. He wasn't even looking at the screen. Not once. He stared at the floor, like the truth might crawl out and tell him something I couldn't. Everything in me froze. I was lying there, hearing the text say, "It's a girl." And all I could think about was how fast everything had shattered, not because I did anything wrong, but because the one person I thought would be there for me at my most vulnerable moment thought the worst of me. I should have known something was wrong when he barely spoke on the way there, when he sat in the waiting room tapping his leg the whole time, when he didn't even hold my hand, but I didn't want to believe it. I held on to the picture of us in that room, crying tears of joy, naming our daughter, planning our future. Instead, I stared at the monitor alone, while the father of my baby dadded her before she was even born. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him, why now? Why here? But I didn't. I just sat there frozen, because something in me knew this moment changed everything. The tech kept talking. I could hear her voice, soft, cheerful, unaware. I nodded along, pretended to listen, but inside I was falling. I looked at his hands, still, distant, as if touching me, even accidentally, would confirm something he didn't want to believe. I thought about all the nights I laid awake wondering if he was really with me in this, if he saw this baby as real, as his, as ours. And now I had my answer. He didn't believe me. Worse, he didn't trust me. I didn't know it then, but that moment broke something I didn't even know was holding me together. And once it broke, there was no putting it back. 2 years before that moment, my life was quiet in all the wrong ways. Not peaceful quiet, just empty. I had come out of a breakup that had left me doubting everything. My judgment, my worth, my ability to be loved without breaking. I wasn't looking for anyone. Honestly, I didn't think I had the capacity to fall again. Not after the last guy. He had taken everything soft in me and made it feel like a weakness. But then James came along. Or maybe I just wanted someone to come along. He wasn't loud or charming in the way I was used to. He was the opposite of chaos. Reserved, calm. He made eye contact when I talked. He remembered little things, like the way I took my coffee or that I always rubbed my thumb when I was nervous. It felt different. Safe almost. Like sitting on a porch after a storm. Our first date wasn't fireworks. It was a quiet walk, takeout in the car, laughing about the worst movies we've ever seen. But something about it stuck with me. Maybe it was because I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I could just be. He called the next day, and the one after that. Conversations turned into habits. Good morning texts, midday check-ins. Let me know you got home safe. He said all the right things. That I was different. That he felt at peace around me. That he wanted something real. And God, I needed to believe it, because I was tired of casual, of almosts, of fixing broken men hoping they'd choose me in return. I remember telling my best friend about him. Her eyes lit up. He sounds like a man, not a boy, she said. And I wanted that to be true. My mom, on the other hand, had her reservations. He seems guarded, she told me once. Just be careful. Sometimes quiet hides more than noise does. I brushed her off, told her she was being too harsh. That I finally found someone who didn't make love feel like a battlefield. And at first, it did feel simple. We moved slow. We laughed a lot. We had lazy Sundays that turned into Monday mornings tangled in sheets and hope. I was falling, quietly, completely. The first time I told him I loved him, he paused, then kissed my forehead and said, "Thank you." I laughed it off, told myself he needed more time, that not everyone loves at the same pace, that his walls weren't about me. He never said it back, not then. Not for weeks. But I waited, because I believed love was about patience. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A late period. 1 line. Then 2. I stared at that pregnancy test for so long. I forgot to breathe. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even shocked. I just felt still, like the world had stopped turning for a second to let me feel what this meant. When I told him, he didn't yell, didn't panic. He just went quiet. That same quiet I used to think meant safety now felt like distance. He sat there, blinking, slowly, like he hadn't heard me right. Then he said, "Okay, Just like that. Like I told him I was switching phone plans. I waited for more. For his arms. For reassurance. For joy. Something. Instead, he got up and started washing the dishes. That night, I cried alone. Not because I didn't want the baby, but because I wasn't sure if he wanted me anymore. But then something shifted. The next morning, he brought me breakfast, told me he'd support whatever decision I made, that we'd figure it out, that he was here. I clung to those words like a life raft. I needed to believe he meant them. The days that followed felt tender. He held my hand at the first appointment. He read articles about fetal development. He smiled when we heard the heartbeat. I thought we were okay. But there were cracks I refused to see. He never talked about the future, not really. He never asked about names, never touched my belly unless I placed his hand there. And I told myself it was fine, that he was adjusting, that not every man glows during pregnancy. I picked out nursery colors. I downloaded baby apps. I started journaling, letters to our daughter, and every night, I'd lie next to him, silently asking the question I couldn't say out loud. Are you still with me in this? Some nights, he'd hold me. Other nights, he'd roll over. But I kept choosing him, over and over, even when he made it hard, even when he didn't reach back, because love, I thought, was about showing up even when it's hard. What I didn't realize was that I was the only one still showing up, and slowly, what once felt simple became something I had to carry alone. It started with silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that follows a slammed door or an unanswered question, the kind that fills a room like smoke, making it hard to breathe. He stopped asking how I felt. That was the first thing. Just stopped. I'd mention a new symptom or something I read in one of the baby books, and he'd nod. Nothing more. Then it was the way he stopped touching me. Not in a sexual way, just in the little ways that used to mean something. A hand on my back. A kiss on my temple. They vanished. I'd lie on the couch with my feet swollen, my mood swinging like a pendulum, and he'd sit on the opposite end, scrolling on his phone. At first, I thought it was stress, work, the reality of everything hitting him. But it didn't stop. Conversations about names turned into shrugs. Talking about the baby registry became arguments. I don't know what we need yet, he'd say, irritated. One night, I caught him texting someone. It wasn't a smoking gun, just a thread between him and a female co-worker. But it was the tone, the late night timestamp, the emojis, the way he smiled at the screen before realizing I was behind him. I asked who she was. He barely looked up. You're hormonal. You're imagining things. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was such a glitch response. But when I didn't let it go, he got mad. You don't trust me? Maybe that says more about you than it does about me. I felt my stomach turn, not from the pregnancy, from the gaslighting. My best friend told me she saw him out at a bar the week before. Said he was talking close with some woman. Said it didn't look innocent. When I brought it up, he flipped it again. Your friends don't like me. They want to ruin this. I was tired. Tired of defending myself. Tired of guessing if I was crazy. So I did what I always do when things get hard. I tried harder. I started making his favorite dinners. I printed ultrasound pictures and framed one for his desk. I folded baby clothes and lined them up like a little promise. I read articles on how to reconnect during pregnancy. I asked him about his day even when he didn't ask about mine, and all I got back was more distance. He started sleeping on the couch. I asked him why. He said he was stressed, said the bed hurt his back, said he couldn't sleep with all my tossing and turning. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said okay, because I was scared that if I pushed too hard, he'd leave, and I didn't want to do this alone. But the loneliness had already started. Nights turned into silence. Mornings turned into avoidance. And I started talking to my belly more than I talked to him. She kicked one night while I was alone in bed. I cried, not because it hurt, but because she was the only one showing up for me. And still, I hoped. I told myself maybe after the ultrasound he'd come around. That seeing her little fingers and toes would flip a switch. But deep down I knew. I knew something was coming. And still, I didn't expect those words. I want a paternity test. But in hindsight, maybe I should have. The signs were there. The coldness, the avoidance, the way he stopped calling us a family. I just didn't want to believe them. Because believing them meant accepting I wasn't loved the way I thought I was. And that truth, that was the one thing I couldn't carry, not on top of everything else. So I carried the silence instead, until it got too heavy, until it spilled over in that dark ultrasound room, when joy turned into doubt, and love turned into something I didn't recognize anymore. Everything after that ultrasound appointment moved in slow motion. He didn't say anything else. Not during the rest of the appointment. Not on the walk to the car. Not during the drive home. Just silence. Emmy. I stared out the window, my arms wrapped around my belly like I had to protect her from more than just the world outside. I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. That moment. I want a paternity test. It echoed over everything. Louder than the heartbeat. Louder than the text saying, "Congratulations." Louder than anything he didn't say afterward. We got home and I asked him, straight up, "Do you really think I cheated?" He didn't answer at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. Then finally, "I don't know what to think. You've been acting weird since you got pregnant." Acting weird. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of what I felt in that moment. Acting weird. I was growing a human. I was throwing up 3 times a day, losing sleep, gaining weight, feeling every hormone like a tidal wave. And he thought I was acting weird. I laughed. A broken, bitter sound I didn't recognize. "This isn't about the baby. This is about you needing an excuse to check out." And he didn't deny it. He just stood there, quiet, still, like he knew. That was the moment something in me flipped. I packed a bag, slowly, methodically, not in rage, in silence. I called my mom. She didn't ask questions, just told me to come home. And I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even cry until I pulled into my mother's driveway. She opened the door before I knocked, held me like I was a little girl again, and I broke. I stayed in my old room, the one with the peeling posters and faded paint. And I waited for him to say something. Apologize. Take it back. 3 days later, I got a text. "Still want the test, just to be sure. No, how are you? No, I'm sorry. No, I miss you. Just a request." And I said okay. Not for him, for me. Because I needed to shut that door forever. The test came. I took it. He took it. We mailed it off, and for the next 2 weeks, I felt everything and nothing at once. I talked to my belly more than ever. Told her about all the things I hoped for her. Told her she was loved. That she was real. That none of this was her fault. When the results came back, I didn't open them right away. I stared at the envelope for an hour. 99. I took a picture of it. Sent it to him. And no caption. No words. Just truth. He replied, "I'm sorry. I messed up." I didn't answer. I left him on read. Because what else was there to say? That night, I read back through our old texts. The ones from the beginning. The ones where he said I was everything he'd been looking for. And I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I missed the version of me who believed him. The truth was in the results. Black and white. 99.99% certainty. But what hit me harder than the paper was the clarity that came with it. He doubted me, and he couldn't undo that. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my childhood room. My daughter kicked softly, like she knew I needed the reminder she was real. She was mine, and she deserved more than what he gave us. He texted a few more times, said he was sorry, said he needed to be sure, said he was scared. Scared. I was terrified. Every day. Of being a single mom. Of not having enough. Of breaking down. But I never doubted her. Or me. The difference between us was that I stayed. Even when it got hard. Eventually, I let him visit. One time. Supervised. He walked in with a teddy bear and a look I couldn't read. I handed him our daughter. And I watched him cry. It didn't move me the way I thought it would. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I just felt done. He said he'd started therapy, that he wanted to be part of her life, that he knew he'd messed up. I told him we could co-parent. But love? That door was closed. Over the next few months, I focused on building something from the rubble. I finished my degree, took online classes while rocking her to sleep, pulled all-nighters with a crying baby and final exams. I got a job. Nothing glamorous, just enough to pay the bills and buy diapers. Enough to feel like I was moving forward. My mom helped. More than I ever gave her credit for. She held the baby while I showered. She cooked dinner when I was too tired to move. And slowly, we healed things between us. Talked about the years I pulled away. The times I didn't listen. We cried. We laughed. We found each other again. There were hard nights. Lonely nights. Nights when I hated him for making me do this alone. But then I'd see her smile, hear her laugh, feel her tiny fingers wrap around mine. And I'd remember this wasn't about him. This was about her, about me, about showing up even when no one else did. And with every diaper, every bottle, every tear wiped, I learned I was more than enough. Not perfect, not always strong, but enough. And that truth, that was louder than any doubt he ever threw at me. Looking back now, I see it clearly. That test was never about DNA. It was about doubt. It was about fear. It was about a man trying to justify his exit. It took me a long time to admit that. Because for a while, I kept thinking maybe if I'd said less, or done more, or smiled at the right times, he wouldn't have questioned me. But that's the thing about people like him. They don't ask for proof because something's missing in you. They ask because something's missing in them. He didn't need a test. He needed control. He needed to make me feel small so he didn't have to face how much he was shrinking. The truth is, betrayal doesn't always look like someone in someone else's bed. Sometimes it looks like silence when you're screaming inside. Sometimes it looks like an accusation at the exact moment you need support. Sometimes it looks like the person you love choosing suspicion over a belief. And that's what broke me. The most, not the words, not the paper, but the realization that he never loved me enough to trust me. Trust isn't something you earn by carrying a baby or staying up through morning sickness or smiling through fear. Trust is given freely. If it has to be earned with pain, it isn't real. I kept asking myself why he said it then. Why, at that exact moment, he needed to say those words. And the answer I keep coming back to is this: he didn't care about protecting me or our daughter. He cared about protecting his pride. Because if he could blame me, then he didn't have to face himself. I think we all reach a point where we stop asking, why did they do that to me? And start asking, why did I keep letting them? And that's when the healing starts. I forgave him, not because he asked, not because he deserved it, but because I refused to carry the weight of his doubt anymore. I chose peace. I chose to believe that one broken moment doesn't define the entirety of who I am. I chose to raise a daughter who will never have to wonder what it looks like to stand up for yourself even when it hurts. And I chose to live fully, with my scars, with my lessons, with my heart a little harder, but still open, because the test didn't prove who her father was. It revealed who I had become. Strong, clear, unapologetic. If you've ever had someone question your truth, if you've ever had to stand in a room full of silence while your world shifted beneath you, I see you. You're not alone. And maybe the most powerful thing we can do is keep telling the truth, even when no one believes it at first. So here's mine. I thought I was losing him, but I was gaining me. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing really is. If you've ever had a moment where someone you loved doubted you when it mattered. Most, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Someone else might be needing your words right now. And if this story touched something in you, hit that subscribe button. More real stories, more raw truths. Because healing starts with honesty, and you're not alone here.